Welcome to Live with the Louhs with your hosts, Father Nicholas and Dr. Roxanne Lowe, where we will connect our Orthodox faith to day-to-day living and relationships to our family, our work, and our view of ourselves. Father Nicholas is the priest at St. John the Divine Greek Orthodox Church in Jacksonville, and Dr. Roxanne is a licensed clinical psychologist who uses her extensive training in private practice. Questions are welcome by calling 855-237-2346. That's 855-237-2346. Here now is Father Nicholas and Dr. Roxanne.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Live with the Louhs. My name is Father Nicholas Lowe. I'm the parish priest at St. John the Divine Greek Orthodox Church right here in Jacksonville, Florida. And tonight I'm joined by my lovely wife and co-host, Dr. Roxanne Lowe.
Good evening, everyone.
And as many of you know, Roxanne's a psychologist, and we're just so excited that you're taking the time to join us on this Tuesday, January 10th. If you're new to Live with the Louhs, one thing that you should know is that we are a show that we hope marries both faith and psychology to really give you some pragmatic ways to apply your faith every day of your life. We call it practical Christianity, in fact. And so if you're looking for practical Christianity in your own walk of faith, then hopefully Live with the Louhs will be a show for you. The show airs every Tuesday from 8 to 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And before we dive into tonight's really cool and important topic, I do want to encourage all of you to stay connected to us by joining our social media pages. Friends, we are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, all under the headings of The Louhs. And our last name is spelled Louhs. It's a unique spelling. In fact, our show is currently being broadcast live on our Louhs Facebook page, as well as Ancient Faith's Facebook page. And if you're like us, if you're just looking for some daily words of encouragement and inspiration, about a year through your inbox. And so every day in your inbox, if you register for these, you'll just receive a word of encouragement. If you're interested in receiving those and you're not receiving them now, go to our website at thelouhs.com and simply click on that subscribe button. And all you have to do is simply put in your email address, and tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. Eastern Time, you'll receive our daily word of encouragement for Wednesday. And so definitely take advantage of that. And if you're already receiving them, do us a favor and share them with your friends and family. I think one of the things that we've got to do a better job of as a society, really, and as Christians, is continuing to share the light, to use platforms that we have, to use the stages that God has given all of us to make a difference in this world. So if you find those messages encouraging and inspiring for you, definitely share them with your friends and family on your platforms. And as always, we truly love to hear from you. In fact, we already had some email questions already come in for tonight's show, but we encourage you from the very beginning. If you'd like to speak with our guest tonight, who's going to be Father Joshua Makoul, or have a question for us or a comment, feel free to call us at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. You can also email us a question at ask@ancientfaith.com. That's ask@ancientfaith.com. And as we mentioned earlier, you can also leave comments on the comment page of our Facebook page. So we definitely would love to hear from you. So my friends, tonight we're discussing a very important topic. It's a topic of healing. Let me ask you, wouldn't it be great if we never experienced hurt, never experienced the loss of a loved one, or were never disappointed, never had someone do us wrong? The reality is, friends, is that we can all experience times in our life where we can all feel a sense of despair, loss, sadness. And we have to know this important principle that in these moments, it can become a spiritual battle. It can impact us not only physically, it can impact us emotionally and psychologically, but it can also impact us spiritually. How do we heal? Well, tonight we're so excited to have a very good friend of mine, actually a classmate of mine, and Father Joshua Makoul, who's the author of a brand new book that we highly recommend called Healing Work, Giving Humanity a Second Chance. And let me tell you a little bit about Father Joshua. For many of you, you're already going to know a lot about him because he's got a blog and a podcast right here on Ancient Faith. But for those of you that may not be familiar with him, let me tell you a little bit about him. He's the author of Healing Your Wounded Soul, which was published by Ancient Faith in 2020. And he has served as the Dean of St. George Cathedral in Pittsburgh since 2012. He worked in the counseling field for 16 years, received 2 years of training in family therapy at the Philadelphia Child Guidance Center, completed a 1-year certificate service in cognitive behavioral therapy at the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, And he also maintains, as I mentioned earlier, an ancient faith blog called A Healing Driven Life. And his Ancient Faith podcast is called Healing the Unresolved, putting the past in the past. Father Joshua received his master's degree in counseling psychology from Chestnut Hill College in Philadelphia and his MDiv from Holy Cross Seminary in Boston. He is licensed in the state of Pennsylvania for counseling. And Father Joshua, my dear friend and brother, welcome to Live with the Louhs.
Thank you, Father Nick and Roxanne, and God bless your ministry. It's a privilege to be on your show, and thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you, brother. So let's get started, Father Joshua. Why should Orthodox Christians, or really Christians in general, assess or pay attention to their emotional world and how they've been affected by life experiences?
Yes. So that's an excellent question to begin with. As I've been trying to hit upon, even in my sermons at the parish, we have to remind ourselves that, the process we are to be engaged in is this process of, theosis, of deification, of striving to become like God through grace. Okay. Mm-hmm. And this life of transfiguration and this life of transformation, and it doesn't take very long before seriously engaging in this process that all of us are called to live, before suddenly we start to realize, man, this is hard.
Right.
Why am I struggling? And no matter how whole or wholesome or healthy or perfect our upbringing was, it's going to be a struggle, just because, of course, our fallen nature. But perhaps for many of us, that's as good as it gets, is that we might just have to struggle with our fallen nature. And, mom and dad were great. I've been fortunate not to suffer any profoundly disappointing or painful experiences or traumatic experiences. And it's just kind of the run-of-the-mill struggles. But most of us have not gone through life or even emerged from childhood unscathed. So many of us have had profoundly painful and disappointing or even traumatic experiences that are hindering our own spiritual growth, our own theosis, our own deification. And so, I think that many Orthodox Christians we've been confused about what to do and how to address and engage and lean into these painful experiences that we've had. And, one thing everyone readily accepts is that we need to carry our cross. And I think, throughout my ministry and throughout my work, I began to see many misconceptions that many feel that carrying our cross means, well, just acting like nothing happened, not validating my feelings, not talking about what happened. And if I do, that somehow I'm being self-indulgent, and even that's a sin. And so I just need to forgive and get over it and kind of skip all this work. But it doesn't work that way. And so when we don't resolve the painful experiences that have happened in our life, especially when we see that they're holding us back spiritually, especially in the form of, not trusting others, not trusting God. Somehow God, there's no doubt our God is a God of love, but just not with me. Or we have a hard time receiving love. We have a hard time being in the present moment, or we find that we're sad a lot of the time, or we're hypervigilant. We're kind of always living life on edge, anxious, this low-level anxiety, not in the present moment. I have a hard time praying. I go to a parish setting, and I find that I'm being detached, guarded in my relationships. Why do I keep having the same interpersonal experiences over and over again? Well, unresolved, painful experiences affect us in this way. It's very clear how that will hold us back spiritually and cause spiritual paralysis and block our path to theosis, to deification, to this process, this beautiful process that we are called to spend our lives in. And so I would argue or say quite confidently that taking up our cross is the healing work. It's ascetical. It involves self-denial. And so part of taking up the cross, part of the ascetical life, and part of theosis and deification is working through and healing from all these painful and difficult experiences we've had that have injured our mind and our hearts and that have left their mark, so that's.
Father Josh, I love what you're sharing. Obviously from what we do, I mean, it's so life-giving to hear you speak about it. I think that, sometimes people are, yes, afraid to do this, because it is, like you mentioned, self-indulgent or, let's just move on from it. If I focus on God, don't focus on me at all. Like it'll just kind of go away.
Right.
They don't realize sort of where they kind of are part of that journey. But I also find that people are very afraid to open the intensity that is their emotional experience, and the fear that if I engage this emotion, I strengthen it, and I don't like what I feel. I want to get away from it. What would you say to people who really struggle to open up to their emotions that are right there, by the way, underneath the surface, filling the heart, directing the soul? I mean, they're intense. They're almost visceral, but people are afraid to engage with them. What would you say to that?
Okay, no, that's an excellent question. I would say first, we want to make sure we have our support in place, that we're not doing it alone. And of course, God will be there for us. But we need to make sure, whether it's a family member, our spiritual father, perhaps our priest, perhaps our spouse, friends, and perhaps even a counselor, a therapist who's spiritually sound for us. First, we make sure we have our supports in place. And I want to begin answering the question to address this. You're right. This common misconception there that somehow if I engage these behaviors, somehow it's going to unleash them and amplify them. But what we know, obviously, is that it's precisely when we run from our emotions and when we practice avoidance of them that it amplifies them. So we can run, but we can't hide. And so, for example, when we look at some of the newest kind of research on healing trauma and so forth, increasingly some people will boast and say, I don't need to hear the narrative or the story. Tell me where you feel it in your body and sit with those feelings and be at peace with them, and that's where the work lies. Well, there's still a lot of debate and discussion about that. But anxiety, for example, or sadness or depression, the more we avoid it, the more we assign threatening meaning to it, and the more we feel ashamed of it, the worse we're going to suffer. And it creates like a snowball effect. And the only way out, as they say, is through. And so we have to trust this reality. And so it's precisely when we lean, as difficult as it is, it's so easy to sound confident in this. I understand it's another thing to do it, but there really is no other way. When we have to do it gently and patiently and with help, but it's only when we sit with these negative emotions and we listen to what they're telling us and we be at peace with them.
I love what you're saying, the patient, how key is that, right? Because so much gentle and patient with ourselves. So often I find that people judge their emotion rather than try to understand it. And the judgment really derails the process of understanding why it's there. And then they feel shame atop whatever it is. So now we're dealing with a secondary problem rather than, what was going on. So those words are words of wisdom that you're sharing. What are some of the common struggles, Father Josh, that you see in people that are really hard, for individuals to detect, yet are quite disruptive?
Yes. Okay. No, thank you. That's an excellent question. One of the, as you just said, how we relate to our struggles and how we relate to ourselves can cause us to suffer immensely. And, whether it's in, at least from my experience, whether it's in confession or just in my dealings with people over the years, I've often had to tell people over and over again, it's not a sin to struggle. And I think that that's one of the biggest ways in which I see people suffer is that there's so much, they have shame over their struggle. And in fact, it sometimes is confessed in confession. Well, I want to confess that I've been struggling lately. Okay, I'm sorry to hear that, but would God really be upset by that? No, he he would be sad and want to help, and so, but I think one of the biggest things is, of how the biggest ways in which people suffer, and it's hard to detect, is we're very good at, hopefully we're good at being aware of how we treat others, and we're certainly aware of how other people treat us. But are we aware in our quiet moments of how we treat ourselves? You see, how we relate with ourselves, our inner disposition. You see, and I know there's a lot of talk out there today about self-acceptance and self-compassion, and sometimes those words make Orthodox very jittery. It creates this kind of need, whoa, we're not supposed to do that. I mean, read the Fathers, but we need to, before we cast it out, we need to read about it a little more, and it is Orthodox. Okay, mindfulness, accepting our experiences, that not accepting sin. That's where people need, maybe Orthodox Christians need reassurance, but accepting our imperfections, our struggles, I mean, okay? And so how are we, when we have these negative emotions, what are the thoughts that are rolling through our mind, whether we're walking or sitting alone or quietly? Are we saying things to ourselves like, why am I feeling this way? Why am I anxious? What's wrong with me? Why can't I sleep? Here, I see I'm no good. Why am I feeling depressed? That's just going to make it worse. But this is often happening unconsciously. People aren't aware that they're doing this inner dialogue with themselves, the self-rejection, the self-abuse. And sometimes even we see when people have been victims of abuse, whether it was sexual, physical, or emotional, the abuser is long gone. We think we dealt with it, but unbeknownst to us, almost invisibly, we are treating ourselves that way. We are reenacting it by shaming ourselves with shaming responses when we're anxious or sad. And it takes a little work sometimes getting people to be at peace with this, because somehow, as you said, they feel like they're being selfish, self-indulgent, or this is the opposite of what the Fathers taught. But it's not. It's not at all. It's totally consistent with our faith. And so getting people to understand you're not going to feel better until you start being nicer to yourself. That doesn't mean spoiling ourselves. That doesn't mean being indifferent to sin. That doesn't mean not fighting the good fight. It means being merciful with ourselves, showing ourselves the same mercy that Christ would show us. We read the Gospels, and Christ never shamed anybody. If he shamed them, it would just create a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it would make them feel worse, and they would not have become saints. And so we have to kind of emulate that with ourselves. And so I think that one of the most common and most troublesome struggles out there is many people out there thinking it's somehow a sin to struggle, having shame over their struggles, and not realizing how poorly they're treating themselves by running away from their emotions and feeling like somehow they're broken or something's wrong with them because they're struggling. So
Father Joshua,
just based on my experience.
Yeah, let me kind of build on what you were asking, what you were sharing. We oftentimes say that our beliefs shape our behaviors, and what we believe about ourselves will shape how that looks out and how we project out and towards other people, and obviously towards ourselves. But, how do we create, or what would you recommend for our listeners to create that level that we hear so much about within the early church fathers of this knowing yourself, the studying of yourself? Because I think for some people that may be listening tonight, they may not even be aware of how those experiences are truly shaping their behaviors and their interactions with others. How do we create an awareness of even just studying oneself to be able to identify what those experiences may be doing in their lives and how they may be projecting on to other people in their lives? Yes.
Oh, I love that question. That's a fantastic question. That's so, all of, as the founder, cognitive behavior therapy, and of course, CBT is very faith-friendly, said, all emotion is preceded by perception, right? As you said. But recently I heard a talk by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote that famous book, The Body Keeps the Score. But, it's funny because this is obviously coming from somebody who's perhaps more secular. And some of the things he was saying, this is this is Orthodox. This is kind of what we saw with the Desert Fathers and how they hone their skills of insight and self-awareness. Mm-hmm. But so he talked about how we know that we're making advances on our own healing work, and whether it's resolving trauma or painful experiences, is our ability to be self-aware and to be able to engage in self-observation, which he mentioned takes place in the midsection of the brain, but that he went on to say that, we can develop that through meditation. And I'm like, okay, well, all right, meditation. Well, as Orthodox, we have a little more than that, right? Because, of course, we have prayer, silent prayer, right? And, of course, prayer can give us any benefits that meditation can, and, of course, obviously much more than that, okay? So, of course, prayer trumps that, okay? And so it's really through silent prayer, by sitting alone, one-on-one in the classroom with God, that our ability to be self-aware and to engage in self-observation is learned. And we see that with the Desert Fathers. When they were alone in the deserts or they were alone in their cell, it's precisely through that time and sitting with their emotions. If they were practicing avoidance, they would not have had those moments of silence. They would keep busy all the time or so forth. Mm-hmm. So when the monastics were sitting in their cells or sitting out in the desert, they were at peace with themselves, observing their inner processes, being at peace with their emotions, and engaging their emotions. And through silent prayer with God, they learned the skills of self-awareness and self-observation. But we can't do that if we're not responding to ourselves properly. Mm-hmm. So if we're teeing off on ourselves and shaming ourselves because of our negative emotions, we're just going to struggle with self-awareness and self-observation because it will be too triggering and too threatening. So the Desert Fathers show us the way, and they support this work. So I think one of the most effective ways for us to learn self-awareness and self-observation is through silent prayer. And yes, many of us pray with prayer books, and that's good, and that's necessary. But at some point, we have to learn to be able to just sit in silence with God and pray with the heart.
I love that. But, I love that.
I
think it's something that's so needed, especially in this world where we're so filled with so much distractions and noise that are really occupying so much of our mental space, that we need to be purposeful and intentional about creating that such a time where we're just simply, as we hear in the scriptures, of just simply being still and knowing that He's God. You're listening to Live with the Louhs. We are speaking tonight with Father Joshua Makoul. He's the author of a great book, friends, called Healing Work, Giving Humanity a Second Chance. You can find it at Ancient Faith's bookstore. You just have to simply go to store.ancientfaith.com, and you can find the book right there on the homepage. Just a great book. And we do encourage you, as we did at the top of the show, if you'd love to speak with Father Joshua or ask a question or comment, and if you'd like to simply be anonymous, because I know what we're talking about is a little bit heavy, and sometimes people may feel a little bit uncomfortable sharing a name. We totally understand and respect that. But you can call in and speak with Father Joshua right now at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. You can also email us a question right now at ask@ancientfaith.com. That's ask@ancientfaith.com. Father Joshua, we received this email. It's from an anonymous emailer who writes this, and hopefully that you can assist them. It says this: I have been Orthodox for over 30 years and so grateful to be in the church. In my 50s, though, trauma memories started to surface. I had a very sad and dysfunctional family life with lots of abuse. Most of it I remembered, but there were some really awful things that didn't surface until later on in my life. Twice, I almost died from severe abuse before the age of 5. As a result of all this, I now know I have PTSD. I did 5 years of cognitive behavioral therapy, which helped tremendously, but now I see at my core is fear and overwhelm because of the very early traumas where I almost died. In both cases, the people abusing me screamed at me and were violent, saying it was my fault, and if I just listened, this would not have happened. As you can imagine, I have an intense fear of failure because failure equals death. This fear and overwhelm gets triggered anytime someone asks me to do something or to be involved in something. This is especially difficult being a deacon's wife in a very large church. How do I heal this fear and overwhelm trigger and get past it? Father Joshua, what words would you kind of encourage her with?
Okay. Well, first, I want to say to the submitter, the person who shared that story, I'm very sorry. I mean, that's what you went through was horrendous, and how painful. And God bless you for having the courage to share that. And of course, none of it was your fault. Okay, none of it was your fault, and your suffering is real. And I just want to say I'm sorry, at least to hear everything that you went through. And I want to tell you, I want to start by saying you're normal. To whoever is sharing their story, you're having a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. You see, you're quite sane. You're normal, but what you went through was not.
Mm-hmm.
You see, and it's so common to see we have a traumatic experience early in life and it lays dormant. You see, and it's very interesting. The mind, our soul knows when it's time to work on something, and decades can pass. Maybe we've had kids and we're busy raising kids, and then as soon as the kids are out of the house and it's the empty nest, suddenly the pain comes knocking, and like an old wreck under the ocean, the debris starts floating to the surface, indicating, something just went on here and we have to investigate. So that's very normal to all of a sudden have this horrible pain rear its head decades later. So you tried 5 years of CBT, which sounds like it helped, but now it sounds like you need something else to get you the rest of the way. There is no one textbook approach in treating traumatic experience. For everybody, it's different. Some people get what they need from CBT. Some people like internal family system, or sometimes EMDR. Okay, and this is, I talk about this in the book a little bit, and it sounds to the name controversial, but it's very faith-friendly. In fact, there's many Orthodox that are very phobic about talk therapy. Mm-hmm. This is less threatening than that. You see, because EMDR is not talk therapy. In fact, it's self-healing, and certainly God can help us with it. So I'm going to get into that, and then I'm going to make some other things here. But do your research on it. EMDR, I believe, was developed in the early 1980s by a psychologist, Dr. Shapiro, and she discovered one day walking when she was under distress that when she would kind of just let her eyes go back and forth as she walked, she felt more relaxed. And so there's been all this research done on it. The VA system uses it as one of its main treatments on combat veterans who have PTSD. It's that effective. And basically, what we know is that when we have traumatic experiences, okay, certain memories, they're not integrated properly. They're frozen. And they're not stored in a past context. And they're kind of stored in these bundles of like neural networks. And they're not integrated properly. And they're not put in the past. So they get activated very easily. So when we're called to be in a crowd, like the submitter of the question was struggling with, or being around others, it's a trigger. Or if we encounter any situation where there's a fear of failure, that's a trigger, and it activates that neural network, and we feel like it's happening all over again. Mm-hmm. Okay, and so I don't want to. I'm going to try to keep this as concise as possible, but just to encourage the person who is suffering to consider this. Basically, it's a treatment that gives very quick access to those traumatic memories and resumes the processing that never got to occur and that was stunted during the traumatic experience. And EMDR can do in 3 or 4 sessions what years of talk therapy can do. And once somebody learns about it, it's totally faith-friendly. There's nothing hokey-pokey about it at all. It's just what it is while we hold a painful image or belief in our mind, and we do a series of eye movements, it unlocks something in the brain in which there's rapid processing. The memories get processed very quickly through a series of memories and images. Strong motion does come up, but it moves us on very quickly. And it's well documented that in 2 to 4 sessions, people can experience enormous relief from the most horrific traumas. And so when we've done the years of talk therapy and it just didn't do it, and we're still struggling and we feel like we need something more, please look into that. And if you do find somebody who's faith-friendly, that's trained in it, make sure they're certified in it and they're trained in it. But basically, when people have tried that, they often will say, I always knew what happened was in the past, but now I feel it's in the past. And what it does is it pulls the wiring out of those triggers, so we're not triggered anymore. So all of a sudden, it's like, wow, I'm feeling a peace I never felt before. I don't have that fear anymore. It's just a memory. It's not a live memory anymore. But when we've been through traumatic experiences, one of the worst things we could do is fall into the pattern of avoidance. And avoidance is short-term gain but long-term pain, and we've all done it. I'm sure I've done it in my own life. And avoidance is when we avoid experiences where we're going to be challenged, where there is that threat or fear, in this instance, of failure. And so long as we are practicing avoidance, we are not going to heal. And so what the most recent research and studies are showing now is that it is precisely when we get rid of the avoidance, which takes time and work, and we open ourselves up to deep experiences with other people that teach us the opposite of what our traumatic experience taught us, that it can really also accelerate the healing process. And so as I wrote in the book, it's through other people that we were hurt, but it's also through other people that we are healed. We cannot detour humanity. So in the case of this, the woman who submitted the question, it's through people you were hurt, but by avoiding them, we're not going to heal, because there's loving people out there that can teach you the opposite of what the people early in your life taught you. And so it's through others we are hurt, but it's through others that we are healed. And so we have to, as the book says, give humanity a second chance and experience that, and so we have to give ourselves those deep experiences that kind of override what those painful experiences taught us. And so I would encourage you to, with help and support, it's easy to talk confidently about this, but we got to have the support around us to look into this, consider the EMDR. It's very faith-friendly, but also to be gentle with yourself. And if we regress, be merciful with yourself, but cut back on the avoidance and give humanity a second chance and allow yourself to have deep experiences that help you heal.
Father Joshua, we had I love what you're sharing. I think it's going to be so comforting, not only to the provider of the email or the emailer that submitted their comments, but also to this another emailer who just submitted, and this is what she said. She said, I had the same diagnosis of CPTSD, and although I would not wish that on anyone, it was comforting to hear that there is another Orthodox woman out there who has the same diagnosis as me. How would you advise someone to use their faith in their healing journey? Are there any saints or stories about people using their faith to help heal from emotional or physical abuse?
Yes. Okay. So,
Joshua.
So how wonderful that someone got comfort from that, hearing that they're not alone.
Right.
And again, I'm not going to digress right now. But a big gripe that I have is that in our society today, we don't talk about our struggles. And again, I understand it might be awkward in certain situations, but as Americans, of which I am one, we are notoriously not good at verbalizing our emotions, and we just kind of bury things away. And all of us kind of get this false impression that everyone out there is whole and doing well and happy, and I'm the only one that's suffering. And it's so liberating. Of course, we're not happy to hear others are suffering, but to know that we're not alone. And so to the second submitter of the question, you're not alone. There's many out there. And again, you're normal, but the experience that you went through was not. Okay? You're healthy. but the experience that you went through was not. And so how do we use our faith to heal? Well, we can't heal without our faith, and God is there. And so this healing work, as I said at the beginning, is ascetical because it involves self-denial. We're basically having to engage in work that is uncomfortable. And it would be much easier to numb out through self-medicating and avoidance, through food or drugs or alcohol or whatever it might be. But so there's self-denial there. I'm not going to do that. And I'm going to take up my cross and I'm going to wade through this work so that I can continue my spiritual ascent unhindered. So it fits with the spiritual life. And what I'm saying is, so God will help us with it. And there's a synergy there. But I remember the part in the gospel where Christ came upon the paralytic, the man at the pool, who had been laying there for a long time. And he said, do you want to be made well? And he said, well, I have no one to get me to the water. Someone always steps in before me. It's kind of like that with us. And so God wants to help, but he wants us to do it together. Okay? And this healing work will teach us patience, wisdom, humility, resilience. There's spiritual treasures to be reaped from this work, as difficult as it is. And so God is there for us. So prayer, wherever we're at in the healing process, we pray about it daily. So whenever we keep our prayer rule, the morning, afternoon, or at night, we literally bring it to God. And we say, Lord, please heal my soul. Give me insights into myself that lead to healing. Guide me as to what I should do. Lord, heal me of my fears. Give me your peace. Lord, heal me of my control. Whatever it is we're becoming aware of, we bring it in detail to God in prayer. And I absolutely believe that becomes a source of self-awareness, self-observation, because the Holy Spirit reveals things to us, even in this healing work, and will help nudge us and give us thoughts and insights to help us to know what to work on next, and to give us opportunities, and to bring people into our life that can help us heal. And so so the Holy Spirit is our comforter, even in the healing work, and is there to reveal things to us and to guide us along the way, and to cause us to have encounters that, well, were really helpful, and we just know we're not coincidence. And of course, God's grace is there to help us along the way, and so our faith helps us because we have God as our companion. We literally pray for God's grace and for the Holy Spirit, which fills that which we are lacking in. With regards to examples, off the top of my head, I'm not aware of any saints that were abused. I have no doubt that I'm sure they were, even in antiquity, of course, that happened. But I would go to the prophets. Of course, maybe they weren't abused, but remember the prophet Elijah. He had despair. I mean, he had moments where he wanted to die, and he even prayed for it. And what happened? Did God smack him on the head and say, you know what, Elijah, I'm done with you, and abandon him in the wilderness? No. Did he shame him? No. He gave him time to recover, and he sent the raven. He made sure he had shade and that he had drink and food, and was patient with him and stayed with him and did not abandon him. That's the model I fall upon to show how God can aid us in our healing process. The prophets, and how many of them struggled with despair, and especially the prophet Elijah in his darkest moments. And God did not abandon him, but stayed with him. Elijah might not have always known that God was there, but the whole time God was waiting for him and watching and giving him what he needed when he needed it. So I don't want to keep going on.
No, I love that. It's absolutely
Father Joshua, what are some common misconceptions among the faithful about emotional pain and painful experiences in general?
The best answer I could give on that, based on my observations as a priest, certainly, is that there's a lot of self-blame. Many Orthodox think, well, rather than hold someone else accountable, or rather than acknowledge something negative that someone else did, it's less incongruent for me spiritually if I just blame myself. Well, and maybe I wasn't a good enough friend, or I wasn't a good enough son or daughter, or I wasn't a good enough employee or whatever, and so I had it coming, which is not healthy. So self-blame, did we engage in self-blame? But shame, somehow feeling guilty or that we're sinning if we can't just get over something. That somehow we're being selfish if I have emotional pain, or self-indulgent, as we had said. And sometimes even, and in more extreme forms, when somebody finds that they're just not able to get over something, that somehow it's coming from the devil, that it's a temptation. And of course, the devil can tempt us. Temptation is real, but that's not, an example. An example of that could be certainly if we have a hard time, we were always holding grudges against people. Sure, that absolutely can be temptation, but emotional pain is sad, and it's real, and it's something that needs to be listened to, because God healed people. In the Gospels, Jesus healed. He was a healer. So whether it's physical pain or psychic pain, whatever it is, he wants us to heal. You see, and we can only heal by engaging the emotional pain, not feeling shame over it, not just willing it away, and not dealing with it by blaming ourselves. So that's the answer I would offer for that. I'm sure there's more, but that's I don't know how long an answer you want me to give. But
I think that's great. I think what's so helpful is that I'm sure for so many of our listeners, as we're looking on Facebook, as we're broadcasting live also on Facebook and on our other social media platforms, we're seeing all these comments about just how beneficial this is for our listeners. So we're so grateful for you, Father Joshua, and obviously for our listeners who have taken the time to join us. And we encourage you, if you'd like to speak with Father Joshua, we've got a few minutes left of our show. You can call us at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-237-2346. You can also email us a question, as others have, at ask@ancientfaith.com. That's ask@ancientfaith.com. And as we mentioned earlier, we are broadcasting on our social media platforms on Facebook and on as well as on Ancient Faith's Facebook page. So feel free to leave a comment in the comment line. Father Joshua, I think it's so important for our listeners to hear how others can play a role in our own healing. And so maybe you could speak a little bit about how the importance of having the right people, the right village around you as you're journeying through the healing seasons of life.
Yes. Yes. And yes. So basically, when we, when we want the right, I'm just going to hone in on something you said, Father Nick, the right people around us, as sometimes as Orthodox Christians, we get a little confused about boundaries. And so many Christians out there will think, well, love is kind of just letting people run over us or not respect our boundaries, and we can never say no to people. And that's not true. You see, it's totally Christian to have boundaries, and we love everybody, and we don't abandon people. But sometimes we have to set boundaries if somebody's not healthy for us. So if somebody is constantly manipulating us or using guilt or being a negative influence on us, or is just having a toxic effect on us spiritually and emotionally, we can still love them and maintain a relationship with them, but still set boundaries. And so I just wanted to start
absolutely
with that.
Very wise.
To establish that reality, that's not unchristian to set boundaries. And it's not unchristian to say to somebody, listen, if you're going to continue to do this, I have asked in a spirit of love many times to please not talk to me this way, or not do this or that. And I feel like it's not getting through, so I'm going to need to take a break for a couple weeks. When you're ready to consider respecting what I'm saying, then we can re-engage. That is godly, because it's not just for our protection, but it's for their salvation. Because if we don't do that, we could be enabling them. And we might actually be helping them, because they might be like, oh, wow, they're really serious. So maybe I need to stop doing this in order to have a relationship with them. So that's, and then we're helping them. We're helping them in their spiritual life and salvation. So I just wanted to kind of start with that. And so people when we're talking about healing from really painful or traumatic experiences, as I said, people can hurt us, but they also hold the key to our healing. And many of us, I'll just use this as an example. If we have been cut down verbally or emotionally in our life, many people have been through that, can say, can relate to this. Yeah, my whole life, people compliment me, but it goes in one ear and out the other. I seem to only hold on to the things I hear that reinforce my negative beliefs about myself. But if somebody says something positive, I feel good for a moment and then it's gone. So those everyday people experiences sometimes aren't enough to help us heal. However, when we finally reach that point where we say, you know what, I can't live like this anymore. I can't stay in this place anymore. I'm so guarded around people. I'm doing a little better going out, but I'm guarded around people. I'm always afraid I'm bothering people. I'm afraid to reach out, but I'm just not going to live like that anymore. And I'm just going to put myself out there, and I'm going to go to this church event. I'm going to go out with this crowd, this crowd of healthy people, and I'm going to allow them to love me. And I'm going to smile and relax. And we really, with awareness and in a deliberate way, rejoin humanity, and just in a very lovingly carefree way, without hindrance, throw ourselves into our interactions without a spirit of fear. It's precisely then that we open ourselves up to the love of others, and we can be healed. So I danced around in answering that question. I feel like I didn't answer it head on.
I love what you're saying. I think, without hindrance is an important key factor there, because, as we were, speaking earlier in the show about what we don't realize that we do to ourselves in our own dialogue, so many people in emotional pain, wear the label of I'm a burden with others. And, people don't want to be around me. I'm heavy. I'm negative. I don't feel the joy that they feel. Why would anybody want to be in my presence? And there lies the dialogue that validates the reason I isolate. And over time, we sort of don't even know that we've done that. And so I do think it's so important to sort of, talk about that, and to open that up for people, to really think about what is my hindrance in reaching out to people and allowing myself, for others, it could be I don't want to share. We have a real stigma in sharing. As far as we've come, we still have quite a stigma in sharing with transparency what it is that we face in the depths of our soul, in the depths of our marriage, in our families, the way, our relationship with our children. And we live in a Facebook culture where, people put out their best moments, and we go home feeling, sad and defeated that why is my family not like that? Nobody feels the pain I'm in. Everybody looks so happy. And so I think, studying our own hindrances, as you sort of talked about earlier in the show, kind of merging that with this moment, to really know what is that inner dialogue that I am, almost in a self-defeating way, using and following, that stops me from allowing the people God has placed in my path. And I do believe God places people in our lives to heal us, to be part of that healing journey. But so often we are the hindrance that doesn't allow, the healing.
Yes. No. Yes. And so sometimes even, of course, sometimes traumatic experiences live in our nervous system even. And so it comes across in our body language. And sometimes without realizing it, we're giving off physical messages that we're kind of not open for business and not to get close to us, like we're not safe to be around sometimes. And we don't realize we're doing it. Maybe it's in our body, how we sit, our posture, our shoulders, our facial expression, our eyes. And it's all, they call that our somatic narrative, the story that our body is telling and conveying to others. And it's something good to be aware of, because some people out there believe, well, by changing that, it helps. by learning to relax that and smile and so forth, that when we start to change that, the emotions can catch up and so forth. I just wanted to throw that in there to add to what you were saying. But we all have to have people to talk to, but not everybody is good to be talked to. So what I mean by that is, even if we have 2 or 3 people in our life, say, hey, we can call up and say, hey, do you have time to go for a walk? And somebody who is safe, somebody who they themselves will open up. I mean, that's one of the most beautiful friendships, is when they open up and we open up. They share and we share, and we reciprocate, and we're a mutual support to each other. Part of self-regulating our emotions is being able to reach out to others for help and to talk to other people. That's not a weakness. It's a strength. It's a wonderful strength.
Yeah, I think too, Father Joshua, just to kind of add to what you're saying, is that I think that's where I think ultimately when we look at what one of the visions, I hope that I'm correct in saying this, is that I think one of the dreams that Christ has for the church is that the church would be just that a place where people could take off their mask and say, hey, look, here I am. And that it would be a place where people could find, as we hear St. Basil talk about the church being a hospital, and having a place where we could all say that, hey, look, all of us have some area of our life that we're struggling with, some emotion that we're struggling with. I remember the quote that Robin Williams said, that everyone is fighting about that we may not all be aware of. That's and being aware that everyone is in this together. And I think you're so wise when you were sharing that not everyone, though, is a safe place to land, because sometimes you could perpetuate the same problem. And that old adage of misery loves company, you could be around people that actually perpetuate the problem, not help you, guiding you through it. But what would you say are some of the things that you would be looking for, though, in that person? If you don't mind, I think it'd be helpful for our listeners to hear that as well.
That's an excellent question. So somebody who is able to listen, and somebody who is, how can I say, because this might sound judgmental, but somebody who's healthy enough themselves that they can listen to what we're saying without feeling threatened by it and dismissive. And like, well, of course, you just have to do this, or you just have to do that. And people who are going to give us quick solutions, that's not helpful. God bless them. We love them, and they're trying to do their part that's helping. But just somebody who's willing to has empathy, just a sounding board. But we're not even asking them to fix our problems for us. We need to do that. But just somebody who non-judgmentally will listen and perhaps share, who's willing to be vulnerable and share their own life experiences, and really that's the criteria. And somebody who, that's it. I don't really, as you said, I don't know what else to add to that, but somebody who has the ability to listen non-judgmentally, who can bear it, who has the emotional intelligence, I hate to say it, to be able to play that role, that somebody who's not going to say ignorant things and make us feel worse, because that's out there too. Somebody who's going to respond with sarcastic humor or jokes, that's not helpful. There's a time to be around them, but not for these walks, not as a support.
Well, who blames you for it? This is a common deflection too that I hear so often. When a partner turns to their partner and shares their pain, you often hear that's your fault. If you'd only do this, you wouldn't feel that way. It's a common deflection and defense. I think people have a lot of defenses around emotion. They don't realize they're deflecting the discomfort of hearing what is uncomfortable. And I do think as a humanity as a whole, we have to get comfortable being uncomfortable, whether it's us that is in the pain or the person that has come to us who is in the pain. It is okay to be present in that pain. And so often, we struggle with that. And I do have to share this one interesting statement that a client shared with me that I think is so beautiful and so insightful. And she was talking about unhealthy relationships. And she said, I think there's a difference between putting up a wall and having a boundary. And she said, walls block others out, and there's no way for them to come into your life. It's a wall. And she said, a boundary has a door, and it shows you the way. So if you want to walk through the door, you can. Here are the ways to do it. Here's how to be a healthy person in my life. But there is an entryway, and so it's not blocking people out. It's actually giving them the tools, giving them the instructions on how to be part of our life. And it's up to them as to whether they want to walk through that door. But I thought that was a really, just beautiful imagery to have when you think about, well, gosh, am I being a bad person because I've put up this wall or this, really, it is a boundary. We are teaching people how to treat us, and it's up to them, to decide whether they would like to participate, and be part of our healing journey in our life.
That's so true.
Yeah.
I love that, Roxanne.
That's beautiful. Yes, no, that is beautifully said. And just going back to the beginning of what you said, it's one of the hardest things to to sit with that pain and those painful emotions. But I don't want to get into. Somebody had said to me, there was a clinician, a therapist that said they read somewhere that when we sit with our negative emotions, if we say, okay, I'm really uncomfortable, but you know what? Rather than run from it and be anxious and avoid it all day, I'm going to sit in a chair. I'm going to sit with it. I'm actually going to allow myself to feel it and not be threatened by it, and kind of say, what is it telling me? Like if I could put it into words, and we engage it like that painful emotion will have a hard time lasting more than 60 seconds. That immediately it can lessen, you see. But it's so hard. I think that's one of the hardest things for us to master is and some people have it naturally. There are some people out there I've noticed that they're just naturally, that whole self-acceptance and self-compassion. They can just sit with their emotions, the negative ones, and they know how to weigh them out. But it's hard. It's not easy for most people. And
I think that's why your book is so powerful for all of our readers to purchase it and to just take a moment and to read, because again, that book is called Healing Work, Giving Humanity a Second Chance. Father Joshua, I am so blessed to reconnect with you, but also to have you on our show. Your words of real wisdom and just help for people that are struggling, because all of us, I always tell people this, that you're either in a struggle, you're coming out of a struggle, or you're about ready to go into one. And being able to have the tools to manage those struggles, I think, makes a difference in how well we heal, and how long that process may take. And so I know that your words, I'm sure, brought a great deal of comfort to our listeners. So to you, Father Joshua, thank you so much for being with us tonight. And please give my love, our love, to your beautiful family. I look forward to having you on our show many, many more times in the future.
No, thank you. Thank you for the invitation and for having me on. Thank you for your time. And God bless you, Father Nick and Roxanne, and your ministry and your family also.
Thank you, dear friend. And I want to also thank Matushka Trudy for producing tonight. So as she always does such an extraordinary job in doing so. And also all the great people at Ancient Faith for allowing us to do this show. We absolutely love being on the show and doing this ministry. I do want to let you guys know that next Tuesday we're going to be speaking with Father Andrew Damnick as well as Richard Rowland. They have an auto documentary called The Wolf and the Cross. It's outstanding. We're going to talk about that with them next Tuesday. So we hope that you all will plan to be with us. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, if you're looking for daily inspirational messages, check out ours. You can subscribe to them by going to the Louhs.com, click on the subscribe button, and all you have to do is simply put in your email address, and every morning at 7 a.m., you'll receive our message for the day. God bless you all, my friends, and stay strong in your walk of faith.
Father Nick and Dr. Roxanne are the authors of the book Renewing You, a priest, a psychologist, and a plant.